Cool. So yeah, my name's Lizzie. I live in Liverpool, in the UK with my husband Dave and our dog Betsy. And I do like a number of things in my week. So the main thing I do is I run Story House with my husband Dave, who is a vicar in the Church of England. And Story House is a coffee shop and a charity and a fresh expression of church. We used to meet in the coffee shop before COVID, but it's been a year now that we've been meeting online. I am also an author. I run a ministry with some friends that started about 7 years ago called Salt, Water and Honey, and we support people who are experiencing miscarriage, childlessness and infertility, and we talk about that from a place of faith to help them navigate it. And also I work for Fresh Expressions, which is a charity in the UK that encourages and supports people who are looking to start new forms of church, maybe in coffee shops or in a field. There's all sorts of wonderful examples of people being creative with kind of following God's calling to reach people who don't normally go to, or maybe aren't interested in, normal forms of church. And so I support the charity in the communications side of that as well. So it's a real mix of stuff, but it's no day's the same, which is great.
And I keep hearing a lot recently about a portfolio lifestyle where people kind of end up doing a number of different things, and I think it works really well with my personality as well, like creative and kind of doing all sorts of different things. So I'm sure it comes with challenges as well, but would you say that you've got a portfolio lifestyle, or are you wedged into one kind of sense of vision and direction?
I think it probably is a portfolio lifestyle. It was never intentional. And I, when I was younger, talking about discernment, I never really knew exactly, I didn't feel like there was a very specific, very clear kind of vision for exactly what I was going to do with my life. Whereas, in my 20s, a lot of people, there was a very clear calling straight away, and I did languages and I traveled and I tried lots of different stuff and was involved in mission work. And so I think probably there is a theme that runs through it of and it is to do with communication, I think, and using my voice. And I feel like that's a very important part of kind of discerning whatever I do, is how will I use my voice in this space. And one could be telling people about Jesus, and the other one is kind of learning to share my story and help others do that. And the coffee shop helps with that. Salt, Water and Honey does. There's all different spaces where you can do something similar, but I think as you try stuff, then God reveals more, and you understand maybe the context more, and then you try something else, and it kind of takes you down this path. I never thought I'd write a book. I know there's so many things I never thought I'd do, but you just kind of follow obediently, and then God reveals new avenues and new passions that maybe were deep but you didn't realize, and opportunities. So I've had a lot of gap years that we say in the UK, when you try something, when I was younger, but it's definitely been an adventure, definitely.
And it's so great to think about it as an adventure, isn't it? Sometimes just changing the language around how we think about our vision and our story helps so much, and kind of puts it in a more positive God light, as opposed to just getting really tense inside about what life is supposed to be. We just try, we learn from failure, and we move on, right? Definitely. But among all these different things that you do, Lizzie, I just wanted to ask you today about this church in a coffee shop, the Story House. Can you tell us a bit more how it works? And more specifically, how did you come to discern that this is what you're supposed to do? Or how did you start that?
It's quite unique. And there was someone who follows me on Instagram, and she saw what I did, and she was like, a church in a coffee shop, how does that work? And I was like, well, we have the best coffee, we have the best church coffee in the northwest of England, and maybe possibly further. So I think basically the whole vision for Story House came from this passion to connect with and tell people about Jesus that wouldn't walk into a church building. And in the UK, especially the kind of younger generations of like people in their 20s, 30s and younger, they are disconnecting with traditional models of church that we've seen like in the statistics of the church. And so we really wanted to create a space that people would want to be in, and want to hang out in, and a coffee shop's just a really natural way to do that, and it's very social, and it's quite interesting how also I think with discerning what to do, we just love coffee shops. And so I know other people that kind of develop other ministries, and a lot of it comes out of just that personal love of an activity or a place. And I really love coffee. We always have loved coffee shops, and so it was something that it didn't feel maybe as much work, because we'd already imagined, if I ran my own coffee shop, this is what it would look like when we were sitting having a coffee in different places. So it came from a kind of natural place of somewhere that we like, and somewhere that also connects with people of all ages, but particularly younger generations. And I mean, really that did help us discern what we wanted the coffee shop to look like, what we would sell, the music we would play. Everything around it was kind of created to create a fun, creative space, but also that would connect with specifically those kind of demographics that maybe we're missing in the church. Running a coffee shop wasn't a new thing for us. My husband and I, 10 years previously to starting Story House, we'd actually met in another city called Chester, not far from Liverpool, and we'd actually opened another coffee shop, and it was with the same vision. Although we never initially thought it would turn into a church, the first coffee shop. I think we were very young. We just wanted it to be a space for people to find out about Jesus, and we'd host events there, and people used it as a space for their youth groups to meet and stuff like that. But I think we hadn't really grasped the potential of what was possible. The thing was, with this coffee shop, the vision behind it did work. We saw people come to faith, which was incredible. But actually financially, then the coffee shop closed after 10 months because it wasn't in a very good location. There wasn't a lot of footfall, and you need that for a coffee shop. So we got married after this closed, and it was a very painful time, because it was also a project that we'd gone around all the churches, we told them about our vision, we'd raised money for it, and it was a very public failure, and it was the first kind of experience of failure that I'd had, especially in my Christian kind of walk, and trying to navigate what faith looks like when things don't go to plan was a huge learning curve for both of us, and grieving what was lost. And so after that experience, our vicar did, at the time, he spent a lot of time praying with us and encouraging us not to be ashamed of that story, because I think we often read books and hear stories of the successes of people who prayed in faith and God provided and it all went to plan, that's not, the walk of faith is messy, and there's pitfalls and there's high points, and but I trust that God doesn't waste anything. And my mum had this kind of dream after the cafe closed of the woman that anointed Jesus's feet, and she cracked the perfume over his feet, and it was seen as so wasteful by the people around, but actually it was an act of worship, of like pouring out of herself. And it really felt like that, the first cafe. It was an act of worship, and it wasn't up to us to kind of control the outcome, but we surrendered that to God. And so it's been a huge part of our journey, was kind of recovering from that and going back into church ministry and serving at weekends. And so we did say we'd never do a coffee shop again. And so when we moved to Liverpool and the idea for a coffee shop came up, it was really scary to kind of make yourself vulnerable in that way again. But we prayed about it a lot, and there was a really significant moment when it was just my husband and I, and then the vicar of the church that we were connected with. We were the only three people that knew about this idea, and it was just from listening to God, looking at the area, thinking like, what does this area need? There was a village centre, a town centre, lots of empty shops, and it just looked like it needed a space for community to gather that would also bless that town centre and maybe help other businesses come back. And it just, the more we thought about what could we do, it just seemed like a coffee shop would answer a lot of those questions and those problems. And we were in this prayer meeting, and some people from another church in another city had come over to pray for our congregation. And one guy was praying, and he just said, you're thinking of opening a coffee shop, and you need to do that. And it's one of the very rare moments when I've had a very, very clear, specific kind of word from God about a decision I was trying to make. And sometimes I wonder if that happens when maybe it's going to be difficult, but you've got that word to go back to. And so we kind of looked at each other in the room. It's like, we've got to try this. And so the coffee shop's been open 5 years now, which is remarkable. And yeah, it's just such a gift to because the last one only opened for 10 months, so to kind of get past the year mark felt like miraculous. And it's open Monday to Saturday. It runs as a coffee shop. It's got 2 floors, and so on the second floor, before COVID, we would have different activities going on for the community as well. And we employ most of our staff. They're mostly teenagers and young adults, and so we try to invest in their lives. And then the church started about 2.5 years ago, and it was really a collection of people we kind of knew but weren't going to church because they weren't really connecting with the churches in the area. And so we gathered, and they agreed, they thought the coffee shop would be a great place to meet, and somewhere they'd want to invite their friends to as well. And so we kind of imagined, what could church look like? What would they like? What do they like about church? What do they struggle with church? And we kind of created it, used the space to inspire us. And so that we would meet for brunch and have coffee together and sit around the tables, because it was a coffee shop, and then have a time of worship together, and the teaching was around the table as well. So we used the space. We didn't just do normal church in a different building. We tried to kind of adapt church around the space to make it feel more natural. And it was always a space, because we sat around the table, people could ask questions as well. So we felt they really wanted it to be a place to bring their doubts. And so it's just kind of grown from there. And what we hoped would happen is, we have had some people who we met as customers who then came to the church. And that's a big journey, and it takes a long time to see that fruit. But we have started to see that now, people who enjoyed coming in, they got to know us, and then they came to church and they found Jesus. So yeah, it's been a long journey, and I'm very impatient, and it always takes longer than you think to see things come into plan. But that's kind of where we're at the moment. That's a bit about Storyhouse.
Lizzie, this is such an amazing story, and it kind of just reminds me yet again that somebody's story is a real gift to us. And I'm hearing it, I think, for the second time, and the second time I'm listening and getting other things from it. So thank you so much. Like, for example, today I feel like God has reminded me that we have to give God something that he can bless. Sometimes we just sit on the fence and we don't do anything, but actually, even if we start small, give a small thing to God, give him an opportunity to bless something, and then see what God does with it. So Lizzie, in the second part of the interview, I will ask you some questions about obstacles and struggles. And I know you have already mentioned some, but also some of the things that have helped you to discern. So thank you so much for this first part of the interview. It's an inspirational story.
Thank you.